The elevator cables groaned as we descended into absolute darkness. 63 people crammed into a space meant for 20. Someone's elbow dug into my ribs. A child whimpered near my feet. Above us, 300 yards of solid Michigan earth separated us from the screaming. The screaming had stopped an hour ago. That's when we knew it was too late to save anyone else. My name's Marcus Webb, and I'd been supervising the Hutchinson salt mine for 11 years before the world ended on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The mine stretched beneath 4 counties, chambers carved from pure halite deposits that had been forming since the Silurian period, back when this whole area sat at the bottom of an ancient sea. Each extraction chamber was the size of 2 football fields placed end to end, with ceilings that soared 40 feet high. We'd created an underground maze of white crystalline halls that looked like the interior of a geode. When the emergency broadcast cut out mid-sentence and Jerry Holbrook burst into my office with blood on his jacket, not his blood, I had maybe 90 seconds to make the call. Jerry managed the surface operations. He wasn't the type to panic. The fact that his face had gone the color of old chalk told me everything I needed to process. "Get everyone below," I'd said. Those 3 words condemned us to what came next. We weren't supposed to be down here with families. Mine safety regulations existed for good reasons. Limited oxygen recycling, no medical facilities, food supplies meant for emergency shift extensions only. But Jerry had already called his wife, and his wife had called the others, and suddenly we had a caravan of trucks racing down the access road, while things that used to be people stumbled out of the tree line. The descent took 4 minutes. Those 4 minutes stretched into something that felt geological, as if we were traveling backward through time itself, leaving behind the world of sunlight and normalcy, and descending into an era when humans lived in caves and feared the dark. Except now we feared what walked in the light. I counted heads as people spilled out into Chamber 7. 45 total, 32 adults, 13 kids ranging from 4 months old to 17 years. We had the clothes on our backs, whatever people had grabbed during their panicked drives. And the mine's emergency supplies? 3 weeks of freeze-dried rations, first aid kits designed for industrial accidents, and enough diesel fuel to run the generators for maybe a month if we were smart about power usage. The youngest was Emma Torrance's baby, Christopher, 4 months old and crying like his lungs would burst. The oldest was Dutch Morrison, 73, who'd worked these mines since 1974 and knew every chamber and tunnel like the lines on his palm. Between them stretched every variation of human survival instinct. People who'd grabbed photo albums, people who'd grabbed weapons, people who'd grabbed nothing but their children and run. That first night, we didn't sleep. We couldn't. The mine's natural temperature held steady at 58 degrees year-round. Comfortable enough when you're working and generating body heat. Brutal when you're sitting against salt crystal walls trying to process the fact that everything you knew existed only in memory now. Tommy Chen, one of our equipment operators, had managed to grab his ham radio during the evacuation. We spent those first hours clustered around it, listening to the world disintegrate in real time. Detroit gone within 6 hours. The broadcasts grew more desperate, then more sparse, then stopped entirely around 3 in the morning. The last thing we heard was someone in Grand Rapids begging for help that would never arrive. Then static. Just static. "We need inventory," I said once the radio went silent. "Everything we have. Everything we can use." Dutch pulled out a notepad, actual paper. The old man didn't trust computers, and started listing. 3 weeks of emergency food, 18 gallons of drinking water, plus the maintenance facility had another 40 gallons of distilled water for equipment. The generators could run indefinitely if we rationed fuel. We had lights, ventilation systems, the salt-hauling trucks, drilling equipment, and enough industrial supplies to rebuild a small city, if that small city happened to be 800 feet underground. Salt, Dutch said, tapping his pencil against the wall. We got about 3 million tons of the stuff surrounding us. Best natural preservative on the planet. None of us had. We were thinking survival, not preservation. But Dutch was right. People had been using salt to preserve food since the Bronze Age. These chambers were essentially massive dehydrators with perfect humidity control. Anything we stored down here would last indefinitely. "How long can the ventilation run?" Jerry asked. He'd cleaned the blood off his jacket but kept touching the stain like he couldn't quite believe it was there. "Depends." I walked over to the main ventilation shaft. "We've got 3 surface intake vents and 2 exhaust systems. As long as the intakes stay clear and we keep the fans running, we can maintain breathable air for hundreds of people down here. The mine's rated for crews up to 200 during shift overlaps. And if the intakes get blocked?" Sarah Denton asked. She taught 3rd grade in the surface world, the former world. Her 2 kids sat pressed against her sides. I didn't answer immediately. Everyone understood what blocked intakes would mean. 800 feet of earth above us, and no way to breathe. "We'll need to establish a rotation," I said instead. "Someone has to go topside regularly and check the vents, clear any debris, make sure the intake screens stay functional." Nobody volunteered for that duty. Not yet. The memory of those screams was too fresh. The mine operated on 3 levels. The upper level, where we'd descended, contained the newest extraction chambers and the main equipment depot. The middle level held the older chambers from the 1980s expansion, mostly empty now after decades of harvesting. The lower level was the original mine from the 1960s, a maze of smaller passages and rooms that Dutch called the catacombs. We spent the first 72 hours establishing basic systems. I organized work teams based on skills and physical capability. Jerry Holbrook took charge of topside reconnaissance. Someone had to venture up eventually, and he'd already seen the blood up close. Dutch Morrison became our chief architect, mapping out which chambers could serve which purposes. Tom Chen handled electrical and mechanical systems, running power calculations and generator maintenance schedules that would keep our lights burning. The division of labor happened organically. Some people gravitated toward physical work, hauling supplies, building partitions, reinforcing structures. Others focused on logistics, rationing food, organizing inventory, tracking resources. Sarah Denton set up a makeshift school in Chamber 9, using chalk to write lessons on the salt walls. Emma Torrance somehow kept baby Christopher quiet enough that we weren't all losing our minds from constant crying. Patricia Valdez, who'd been a nurse before budget cuts shuttered the county hospital, established a medical station in Chamber 11 using our first aid supplies and whatever medications people had brought. We converted Chamber 7 into communal living space. The salt walls reflected our LED work lights with an almost supernatural brightness, turning the massive cavern into something that resembled the interior of a crystal. We arranged our sleeping areas along the perimeter, blankets, and sleeping bags and tarps creating small privacy zones. The center remained open for gatherings, meals, and the nightly meetings where we pretended we had any control over our situation. Chamber 8 became storage. We organized everything we had: food, water, medical supplies, tools, fuel. Dutch suggested leaving Chamber 6 empty as an expansion zone once we figured out sustainable food production. Nobody laughed at his optimism. We needed that forward thinking to keep from spiraling into the kind of despair that ends with people walking into the dark tunnels and not coming back. The generators lived in Chamber 10, isolated from living spaces because of the noise and diesel fumes. We ran power cables through the connecting tunnels, creating a grid that could light and heat the essential areas. Tom calculated we had fuel for 90 days at current usage. After that, we'd be in darkness unless we figured something out. Darkness 800 feet underground wasn't just the absence of light. It was absolute, crushing, the kind of black that made you question whether your eyes were even open. Day 4, Jerry made the first topside run. He took 2 others, Michael Strand, who'd been a cop before this, and young Kevin Foster, 17 and stupid brave enough to volunteer. They geared up with hard hats, flashlights, and the only weapons we had, a shotgun from Michael's truck and 2 pickaxes from the equipment depot. 30 minutes, I told Jerry. Check the vents, scan the horizon, and get back below. Don't engage anything. Don't be a hero. Jerry nodded, but his eyes had that 1,000-yard emptiness I recognized from my own reflection in the polished salt walls. We'd all developed that look, the look of people who'd watched their entire civilization collapse in less time than it takes to finish a work shift. They were gone 47 minutes. When the elevator cables finally whined and the cage descended, all 3 were back, but Kevin was crying and Michael had to hold him upright. The vents are clear, Jerry reported. His voice came out mechanical, stripped of inflection. Nothing damaged the intake screens, but the parking lot. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. We'd all left vehicles up there. We'd all left a world up there. Did you see any of them? I asked. 17, Michael said. Counted 17 within visual range of the main building. They're not actively hunting, just wandering, but they noticed us. They noticed the sound of the elevator. That changed things. The mine entrance stood exposed, just a metal building and concrete shaft connecting us to the surface. If those things figured out we were below, if they found their way to the elevator controls, if they stumbled into the shaft and fell the 800 feet to our level, the image of dozens of broken bodies piling up at our doorstep, still moving, still grasping, made my stomach clench. We need to secure the top, Dutch said that night during the community meeting. Reinforce the entrance. Maybe collapse the access tunnel if we have to. Collapse it? Sarah's voice climbed 2 octaves. Then we're trapped down here forever. We're trapped down here regardless, Dutch replied, not unkindly. Question is whether we're trapped with them able to reach us or not. The debate consumed 3 hours. Some argued that sealing ourselves in meant abandoning hope of rescue, of eventual return to the surface, of anything beyond this underground existence. Others pointed out that rescue wasn't coming, the surface wasn't safe, and hope was a luxury we couldn't afford when balanced against security. The vote was close. 23 for collapsing the main access tunnel, 22 against. I had to break the tie. I voted to keep it open. Not because I thought rescue was coming. Not because I believed the surface would suddenly become safe again. I voted to keep it open because the moment we sealed ourselves in completely was the moment we stopped being survivors and became something else, something I wasn't ready to name yet. We'd become the buried, the entombed, people who'd chosen a slow death underground over a fast one topside. But we did reinforce the entrance. Jerry led work crews topside during daylight hours. Those things seemed slower in direct sun, easier to avoid. They welded steel plates over the elevator housing, installed multiple locks, created a barrier system that would at least slow any intrusion. It bought us the psychological comfort of a defensive perimeter, Even if we all knew that comfort was mostly illusion, if you've ever had to choose between impossible safety and possible hope, you'll understand the weight of that decision. Like and subscribe to see how we learn to live with the consequences. 2 weeks in, the food situation went from concerning to critical. We'd stretched the emergency rations as far as possible, supplementing with whatever people had brought. Stale crackers, cans of vegetables, 36 energy bars that tasted like compressed cardboard mixed with optimism. But the math was irrefutable. 45 people consuming 2 minimal meals per day, approximately 1,200 calories each, when we needed at least 1,500 to maintain basic functionality, meant we'd be out of food in less than a week. "We need a supply run," Jerry said during the leadership meeting I'd been holding every morning. "The grocery store in town, hardware stores, pharmacies, anything still standing." "That's suicide," Tom argued. "We've heard what happens in population centers. Everyone trying to grab supplies, everyone turning on each other, and now everyone shambling around looking for fresh meat." "We don't have a choice," Jerry shot back. "Unless you've figured out how to eat salt." The argument escalated until Dutch stood up. When Dutch stood up, people listened. He commanded that kind of respect, not through force or volume, but through the accumulated authority of someone who'd survived 5 decades in an industry that killed careless people. He'd outlasted 3 mine collapses, 2 equipment failures that should have been fatal, and 1 gas leak that killed 4 men while he was standing 6 feet away. The man understood survival in a way the rest of us were still learning. "There's another option," he said. "The old storage depot on the eastern property line. We used to keep months of supplies out there. Canned goods for the crews, medical supplies, equipment parts. Place got abandoned when we centralized operations, but unless someone's cleaned it out, there should still be inventory." "How much inventory?" I asked. Dutch scratched his jaw, calculating. "When I worked supply rotation in the 90s, we kept enough stores for 6-month isolation periods. This mine runs 24/7, including winter storms that can cut us off for weeks. Company policy was always over-prepare. Could be picked clean now, but it's worth checking before we risk a town run." We assembled a team: Jerry, Michael, Tom, and myself. 4 men, 2 vehicles from the underground parking garage where we'd stored the trucks people drove in. The garage sat adjacent to Chamber 10, carved out during the 1990s expansion when they'd started bringing equipment directly underground for maintenance. We'd go at dawn, hit the depot, and return before full daylight attracted too much attention. I spent the night before writing letters I'd never send to family I'd never see again. My ex-wife Rachel living in Phoenix, probably dead now, maybe worse. My brother in Seattle, my parents in Florida, all of them beyond reach, beyond saving, beyond everything except memory. When you realize everyone you've ever loved outside these salt walls is likely gone, the weight of that knowledge becomes almost physical. It settles in your chest like crystallized grief, heavy and sharp and permanent. The drive to the depot took 23 minutes through back roads and forest paths. We kept to logging trails mostly, avoiding the main highway where abandoned vehicles had created a maze of wreckage. We saw them, the infected, that turned whatever label made them easier to conceptualize. A cluster of 6 stumbling through what used to be Henderson's cornfield, moving with that distinctive jerky gait that suggested muscles firing in patterns that no longer made biological sense. 2 more clawing at the windows of an abandoned farmhouse, drawn by some phantom movement or sound we couldn't perceive. Individual wanderers scattered across the landscape like broken pieces of humanity that didn't fit together anymore. None of them noticed our trucks. We kept engines low, lights off, moving with the kind of careful stealth that prey animals understand instinctually. Michael navigated using a paper map because GPS satellites had presumably stopped functioning weeks ago, along with most of civilization's technological infrastructure. The depot stood behind a chain-link fence, partially collapsed. The main building showed signs of forced entry, doors hanging open, windows shattered, dark stains on the concrete that could have been blood or oil, or both. But the storage warehouse in back appeared intact. Heavy steel doors, industrial locks, the kind of security designed to prevent theft of valuable equipment and supplies worth more than most people earned in a year. Could be empty, Michael whispered as we approached. Could be full of them. Only one way to find out, Jerry said, and stepped forward with the bolt cutters. The lock snapped with a sound like breaking bone. We froze, waiting for that sound to attract attention. 30 seconds. 60. Nothing moved except the wind through dead corn stalks, creating a rustling that sounded disturbingly like whispered conversation. Inside, darkness pressed against us like something alive. Our flashlight beams cut through the black, illuminating rows of industrial shelving that stretched back into shadows. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by our entrance after weeks of stillness. And on those shelves, oh, thank God, Tom breathed. Supplies, not just supplies, abundance, canned vegetables, dried goods, medical kits, bottled water, propane tanks, clothing, blankets, tools. Dutch's memory hadn't failed. The company had indeed overprepared, and by some miracle nobody had found this place yet. Or if they had, they hadn't survived long enough to make use of what they'd found. We loaded both trucks until suspension groaned. Made 3 trips total over the next 4 hours, working in frantic silence, always watching the tree line for movement. The depot had been stocked for emergencies that the company's risk assessors had imagined. Winter storms, labor strikes, equipment failures. Nobody had imagined this particular emergency. But their paranoid preparation was saving our lives now. On the final trip, as I was hauling a box of canned protein toward the truck, I heard it. Singing. Faint, distorted, barely audible over the wind. A child's voice singing something that might have been a nursery rhyme or might have been gibberish. The sound came from inside the main depot building, the one with the broken windows and ominous stains. "Leave it," Jerry hissed. "Whatever that is, we leave it." Some instinct older than reason, some stupid heroic impulse that survival should have burned away. The same impulse that makes people run into burning buildings or dive into frozen rivers to save strangers. It's the impulse that keeps us human, and it's the impulse that gets us killed. The depot's main room was a slaughterhouse. I'll spare you the details because some images don't need description, and because the specifics don't matter as much as the totality. The overwhelming evidence of violence. Of people who'd sought safety here and found something else instead. But in the corner, behind an overturned desk, I found the source of the singing. A boy, maybe 8 years old, covered in blood that wasn't his. I could tell by the way it had dried in splatter patterns rather than pooled wounds. Eyes that had seen things no child's eyes should contain. He sang and rocked and didn't seem to register my presence, even when my light hit him full in the face. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey, buddy, can you hear me?" His singing stopped. His head turned toward me with mechanical precision. For one horrible moment, I thought he'd been bitten. Thought I'd have to leave him, or worse. Thought I'd have to explain to the others why I'd risked all of us for a kid who was already dead. But then he spoke. "They ate Mr. Peterson," he said conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. "They ate him and then they left, and I've been waiting for someone to come back." His name was Lucas. We brought him back to the mine. The kid was traumatized beyond anything Patricia's limited medical knowledge could address. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just shut down into this eerie, quiet state where he'd follow instructions mechanically, but showed zero emotional response. Sarah tried to integrate him with the other kids, but Lucas would just sit and stare at the salt walls like he was trying to memorize their patterns, like he was cataloging every crystalline formation as a way to avoid thinking about what he'd witnessed. But the supplies from the depot bought us time, real time. Dutch calculated we had food for 90 days, maybe longer with strict rationing. The propane tanks meant cooking fuel. The medical supplies meant we could handle injuries and illnesses beyond basic first aid. The clothing and blankets meant warmth. The tools meant we could continue building, expanding, transforming this mine from a survival shelter into something resembling a functioning habitat. We weren't thriving, but we weren't immediately dying either. That counted as victory in the new mathematics of existence. The mine settled into routine. We marked days on the salt wall of Chamber 7, scratching tally marks into halite that would probably outlast our species. Each morning, artificial morning, since we never saw actual sunlight, we gathered for inventory check and work assignments. Each evening we gathered again for communal meals and updates. Jerry continued topside reconnaissance every 3 days, religiously, like a priest conducting services. The pattern up there remained consistent. More of them, fewer signs of anything living. The things didn't decay normally. Something about the infection preserved them, kept them mobile long past when a normal corpse would have broken down. We watched from the reinforced entrance as the parking lot gradually filled with wanderers, drawn by some instinct toward the mine entrance. "They know we're here," Michael observed during week 5. "Don't know how, but they know." He was right. The things had stopped wandering randomly. They congregated near the mine entrance, dozens of them, sometimes more, just standing there, waiting, like they had all the time in the world and knew eventually we'd have to emerge. Like they understood siege warfare better than we wanted to admit. That realization shifted something fundamental. We weren't hiding temporarily. We were besieged. This wasn't a shelter, it was a fortress. And fortresses either hold forever or fall eventually. Dutch approached me during week 6 with his architectural plans. He'd spent the isolation period mapping expansion possibilities, calculating how we could transform survival into something resembling sustainable living. The diagrams he'd created were remarkably detailed, hand-drawn schematics showing room layouts, ventilation patterns, structural support calculations. "The catacombs," he said, spreading his papers across my sleeping area. 67 rooms in the original mine, most of them 800 to 1,000 square feet. We could build individual family quarters, create privacy, give people space to be human instead of this refugee camp existence. "That's a lot of construction," I pointed out. "We'd need materials, labor, time. We've got all 3. Salt's soft enough to carve but structural enough to build with. We have mining equipment. And unless rescue's coming next week," he paused, letting the unspoken reality hang between us. "We've got nothing but time." The expansion project gave us purpose beyond mere survival. We formed construction crews, working in rotating shifts to carve living spaces from the surrounding salt deposits. The mining equipment we'd used to extract commercial salt now carved bedrooms, common areas, storage spaces. The process was slower than surface construction, but oddly meditative. The rhythmic sound of cutting tools against salt, the way walls emerged gradually from solid rock, the satisfaction of creating order from chaos. We built furniture from salvaged materials and milled salt blocks. The resourcefulness that emerged was remarkable. Tom rigged ventilation for individual rooms using repurposed equipment fans. Sarah created curtains from salvaged fabric, giving people the illusion of privacy even in spaces separated only by thin partitions. Patricia organized a proper medical facility with separate examination and recovery areas. Jerry constructed a workshop where we could maintain tools and equipment. Kevin Foster, the 17-year-old who'd survived the first topside run, revealed an unexpected talent for carpentry and started building tables, chairs, shelving units from wooden pallets, and support beams. The children adapted faster than adults. Kids possess this terrifying flexibility that allows them to accept any situation as normal if it's consistent enough. Christopher, now 6 months old, had never known anything except underground existence. His entire reality was salt walls and LED lights and the constant low hum of generators. 5 others ranging from age 6 to 17. They remembered the surface, but those memories grew hazier with each passing week, taking on the quality of dreams or stories rather than lived experience. Lucas remained our mystery, the silent boy who'd seen horrors and locked them away somewhere we couldn't reach. He participated in activities, followed routines, but never quite connected. Other kids tried to include him. Adults tried to engage him. He'd respond with this eerie courtesy that suggested he was performing humanity rather than experiencing it. Patricia worried about him constantly, but without proper psychiatric resources, there was nothing she could do except monitor and hope time would provide healing that medicine couldn't. Comment below if you've ever watched someone you care about disappear behind their own eyes, because watching Lucas was like watching a ghost inhabit a living body. Week 7, Patricia confirmed what Emma Torrance had suspected. Emma was pregnant again. Conceived in those first chaotic days when people sought comfort in each other's bodies and didn't think about consequences, when the end of the world made long-term planning seem absurd. "I'm keeping it," Emma announced during the community meeting, daring anyone to suggest otherwise. "We're not animals. We're still human. Humans have children." The announcement triggered the fight we'd been avoiding. Some people saw Emma's pregnancy as hope, proof we intended to survive long term, that we weren't just waiting to die in these salt chambers. Others saw it as catastrophic irresponsibility, another mouth to feed, another resource drain, a child born into an underground prison with no future beyond these walls. The argument raged for 2 hours. Voices echoed off salt walls until the whole chamber rang with the sound of our fear and desperation, dressed up as philosophical debate. People said things they'd been thinking but hadn't vocalized. The resource scarcity beneath every decision. The growing realization that we might never leave. The question of whether bringing children into this existence was hope or cruelty. "Enough," I finally said. "Emma's pregnant. That's reality. We deal with reality, not hypotheticals. We make this work because the alternative is giving up, and I didn't bring 45 people down here to give up." The vote was unanimous to support Emma's pregnancy, though I saw the calculation in people's eyes. We were adding life while surrounded by death. The math would have to balance eventually. Month 3 brought the first major crisis. Tom was performing routine maintenance on the ventilation system when something in the upper shaft failed. A bearing froze. A blade broke loose. I never got the full technical explanation. What mattered was that our primary air intake stopped functioning. We had maybe 18 hours of breathable air for 45 people before carbon dioxide buildup would start affecting cognition, then consciousness, then life itself. I can fix it, Tom said, already gathering tools. But I have to access the upper shaft. That means going outside, climbing to the intake vent, and replacing the fan assembly. In daylight, Jerry asked, with those things everywhere, you have a better suggestion? Nobody did. The secondary ventilation system could buy us time, but not enough. We needed the primary intake functioning, or we'd all die down here in the dark, suffocating in our own exhalations. Tom took Kevin Foster with him. The kid had training in mechanical systems and the nerve that comes from being 17 and not fully comprehending mortality. They armed themselves with what weapons we had, loaded the replacement parts, and ascended at dawn when the things moved slowest. Those of us below waited. 43 people sitting in the slowly warming chamber, breathing carefully like we could conserve oxygen through mindfulness. The psychology of suffocation is insidious. Once you know air is limited, every breath feels insufficient. People started hyperventilating, which only accelerated oxygen depletion. Patricia moved through the chamber coaching people through controlled breathing exercises, trying to keep panic from triggering the very crisis we feared. I watched the kids' faces. They didn't understand why everyone seemed tense. They'd grown used to adults fixing problems, making the underground world work through mysterious competence. To them, this was just another day, another inexplicable adult concern. 40 minutes passed. 50. An hour. The air began feeling thick, though that was probably psychological. Probably. How long can we last? Sarah asked. Patricia had already done the math. If they're not back in 3 hours, we'll need to make decisions about who goes topside to help versus who stays below where it's safer. You mean who lives and who dies? Michael said flatly. I mean we conserve oxygen by having fewer people breathing while some of us attempt repairs. Patricia replied, but everyone heard what she wasn't saying. The argument that emerged was purely academic, a way to channel our helplessness into theoretical action. We were debating which adults should sacrifice themselves, which skills were most essential, which lives had the most value, when the elevator cable started moving. Tom and Kevin emerged covered in blood and grease and salt dust. Tom's arm was torn open from shoulder to elbow, parallel cuts that looked suspiciously like teeth marks, the kind of wound that meant death in the new world. Kevin carried their tools and his own terror, moving like someone in shock. Fans fixed, Tom reported, voice steady despite the blood dripping from his fingertips. We good? The infection didn't work the way we'd seen in the movies before the broadcast stopped. Tom didn't immediately turn into a mindless monster. The bite festered slowly, the fever building over 3 days while we isolated him in Chamber 12 and debated what mercy looked like. We watched Tom die slowly. That's the part nobody talks about when they discuss survival. The slow deaths, the ones where you have time to think about what's happening, where the person dying has time to understand their own extinction. Patricia changed his bandages twice daily, cleaning the wound that had already turned black at the edges. The infection spread in dark tendrils up his arm, mapping his vascular system like some grotesque anatomical diagram. We can't keep him alive, Jerry argued on the second day. If he turns down here, trapped in enclosed spaces, he could kill us all before we contain him. He's not dead yet, Patricia countered. The bite might not be infectious. We don't actually know how this works. We know enough, Michael said quietly. I've seen enough on the surface. Everyone who gets bit turns. Everyone. It's just a question of when. But Tom made the decision for us. On the third night, when the fever had him hallucinating and the wound had turned his entire arm the color of rotted meat, he asked me to end it before he became something that would hurt people he cared about. "Don't let me turn," he said. His voice came out rasping, barely audible over the generator hum. "Don't let me become one of those things. Please, Marcus." I won't describe what happened next. Some things don't need documentation. But we buried Tom. Really buried him. Took his body to the deepest part of the catacombs and sealed the chamber with controlled explosives that collapsed the tunnel. Dutch insisted on marking the location. We scratched Tom's name into the salt wall along with the date, creating the first grave marker in what would eventually become our cemetery. Nobody suggested a service. We'd left that kind of ritual behind with the surface world. But people gathered anyway, standing in silence outside the collapsed tunnel, and I realized we were creating new rituals to replace the old ones. Ways of marking death that didn't require faith in anything except the reality of loss. 44 people left now. 43 after Emma gives birth if anything goes wrong. The mathematics of extinction playing out in reverse. Kevin took Tom's death harder than anyone. The kid blamed himself, convinced he should have moved faster, or fought better, or done something to prevent the bite. He stopped eating regularly, stopped participating in communal activities, spent hours sitting in the darkest corners of the chambers, staring at nothing. He's going to hurt himself, Patricia told me during week 14. I've seen that look before. He's circling something dark. I found Kevin in chamber 15, the one we designated for equipment storage. He sat among spare drill bits and replacement cables, holding one of the pickaxes we'd used as weapons. "You thinking about using that?" I asked. Kevin didn't look up. "Tom died because of me. Tom died because he got bit. I was supposed to watch his back. You're 17. I said, sitting down next to him. Tom was 42. He'd been working dangerous jobs since before you were born. He knew the risks. He made the choice to go up there, and he made the choice to save us all by fixing that vent. Don't take that away from him by making it about your failure." His eyes were red, exhausted. "How do you do it? How do you keep making decisions when every decision might kill someone?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I just keep making them because the alternative is letting everyone die through inaction. Sometimes the only choice is which mistake to make." It wasn't comfort, but it was honesty. Kevin came back to communal meals the next day. Month 4, we hit a rhythm that almost felt sustainable. The expansion project had created private quarters for families. Single adults shared rooms in groups of 3 or 4, but everyone had space that felt personal. We'd established a water reclamation system using mine equipment to filter and purify groundwater that seeped through the upper chambers. Dutch had calculated we could support 60 people indefinitely with current resources if we maintained discipline. The school Sarah ran had expanded. She taught reading, math, basic sciences using textbooks we'd salvaged from someone's truck. But increasingly, the lessons focused on practical skills: how to identify salt formations, maintain equipment, ration supplies, perform first aid, education for a world that existed only underground. The youngest kids, the ones under 7, were forgetting the surface. Christopher had never known it. When Sarah talked about trees or rain or sky, they listened like she was describing fantasy. The concept of outside became abstract, mythological. They understood topside as a dangerous place where monsters lived. but not as the natural habitat of humanity. Jerry's daughter Melissa, 9 years old, asked during one lesson, "Why would anyone want to live up there when it's safe down here?" Sarah had no answer for that. None of us did. We'd created such effective safety underground that the children couldn't comprehend why we'd ever choose anything else. The idea that humans evolved for sunlight and open air, that we were supposed to move freely across the surface of the planet. These concepts were becoming historical curiosities. "We're raising mole people," Jerry said after that class. "Kids who'll never understand what we lost." "Maybe that's mercy," Dutch replied. "Maybe not knowing what you're missing is better than remembering." I wasn't sure which option was worse, remembering the world we'd lost or never understanding there'd been anything to lose. Share this story if you've ever wondered whether it's better to remember pain or forget it entirely, because that question haunted us daily. Emma's pregnancy progressed. Patricia monitored her as best she could without proper prenatal equipment. The baby was due in late March, approximately month 7 of our underground existence. We'd converted Chamber 13 into a delivery room, sterilizing as much as possible with the limited medical supplies we had. "What if there are complications?" Emma asked during month 5. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we handle it," Patricia said with more confidence than I suspected she felt. "Women have been giving birth for hundreds of thousands of years without hospitals. We'll manage." But I saw Patricia pulling me aside later, saw the concern in her expression. "I'm a nurse, not an obstetrician," she said quietly. "If there's a breech birth, if she hemorrhages, if the baby has any serious complications, we don't have the equipment or expertise to handle it. I need you to understand that both of them could die, and there's nothing I can do to prevent it." "What do you need? A miracle? Or medical supplies from the hospital in town?" The hospital run became inevitable. We'd avoided it because hospitals had been death traps, everyone flooding there for help, everyone getting infected in close quarters, the whole building becoming a contained catastrophe. But Emma needed prenatal vitamins, proper antibiotics, emergency equipment in case of complications. We needed to try. Jerry, Michael, Kevin, and myself. The same crew as before, now with 3 months more experience. Surviving. We planned for a week, studying maps, calculating routes, preparing backup plans. The hospital sat 12 miles from the mine entrance, through areas we knew were heavily infested. We left at dawn on day 137. The surface had changed. Winter had arrived while we were underground, and snow covered everything in a pristine white blanket that made the apocalypse look almost peaceful. The things moved slower in the cold. We could see them from further away, dark shapes against white landscape. The hospital parking lot contained at least 50 of them. They'd gathered there, drawn by whatever instinct or memory pulled them toward places of healing. We parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, moving between abandoned cars and snowdrifts. "Pharmacy will be picked clean," Michael whispered. "But the surgical floors might have emergency supplies." We entered through a maintenance entrance, using pry bars to force the door. Inside, the hospital was a frozen tomb. The heat had failed months ago. Bodies lay in hallways, some clearly dead, some potentially dormant, infected, waiting for warmth or stimulus to trigger movement. We moved in silence, communicating through hand signals Michael taught us. Up 3 floors via the stairwell, down the corridor to surgical supply. The pharmacy had indeed been ransacked, but the surgical supply room remained locked, requiring a key card we didn't have. Kevin studied the lock, I can bypass it, but I need 20 minutes. You've got 10, Jerry said, watching the hallway. Kevin worked while we stood guard. The hospital's silence was absolute. No machinery hum, no human sound, just the occasional creak of frozen pipes and our own breathing. 8 minutes in, I heard it. Footsteps, slow shuffling coming from the southern stairwell. Kevin, I hissed. Almost there. The footsteps grew closer. I could see the shape emerging from the shadows, not shambling like the others, but moving with disturbing purpose. It turned the corner, and I recognized him. Dr. Raymond Marsh. I'd known him. He'd set my arm after a mining accident 3 years ago. Now he was something else, wearing Dr. Marsh's face, moving toward us with single-minded focus. Michael raised the shotgun. "Wait," Kevin said. "Got it." The door clicked open. We piled into the supply room and slammed it shut just as Dr. Marsh reached our position. He didn't pound on the door or make noise. He just stood there, waiting. We could see him through the door's small window, absolutely still, watching. "He's blocking our exit," Jerry observed. Then we find another one. The surgical supply room contained exactly what Patricia needed: prenatal vitamins, antibiotics, emergency medical equipment, sterilized instruments. We loaded our packs until they strained, taking everything that might prove useful. But the door still had Dr. Marsh outside it, and the window showed 3 more shapes joining him. "The windows," Kevin said, pointing to the narrow rectangular windows that ran along the top of the wall. "We can climb through, drop to the 3rd-floor roof, and rappel down using the fire escape." It was a terrible plan. It was our only plan. We pushed a supply cart under the windows and climbed. The windows barely fit our shoulders. I went first, squeezing through and dropping onto the roof section below. The cold hit immediately. 20 degrees, wind cutting through my jacket. Jerry came next, then Michael, then Kevin with the medical packs. The fire escape descended 3 stories to a loading dock. We climbed down, exposed on the metal framework, visible to anything watching. I counted at least 30 of them in the parking lot, all turning toward us now, all moving with that horrible, purposeful gait. We ran for the trucks. The snow made running difficult, each step sinking 6 inches. But the things had the same problem. We reached the vehicles with maybe 40 yards lead and burned out of the parking lot, leaving tracks they followed with their eyes but couldn't match with their shambling pace. "We got it," Kevin said, checking the medical packs. "Everything Patricia needed. Tom died for the ventilation system." Jerry said quietly, "We nearly died for prenatal vitamins. This is what survival looks like now." Nobody argued with him. The medical supplies arrived just in time. Emma went into labor during week 28, right on schedule. The labor lasted 14 hours, brutal, exhausting hours where her screams echoed through the salt chambers and everyone waited in tense silence. Patricia worked with Emma while Sarah assisted. The rest of us waited in Chamber 7, unable to help, unable to do anything except listen and hope. The children asked questions we couldn't answer. The adults tried to distract them with activities that nobody could focus on. When the baby finally came, when we heard the cry echoing from Chamber 13, something shifted in everyone's expression. That sound, new life, proof we could create as well as lose, changed the chemistry of our underground existence. Patricia emerged, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Healthy boy. Both of them are fine." The relief was almost physical. People cried. People laughed. For the first time since descending, we felt something that wasn't fear or despair or grim determination. We felt joy. Emma named him Thomas, after Tom Chen, who died to keep us breathing. Watching Thomas grow became the community's shared purpose. Everyone participated in his care, taking shifts holding him, watching him when Emma needed rest, creating toys from scrap materials. His existence proved we weren't just surviving but continuing. We had a future, however uncertain. But Thomas also represented our transformation. He would never know the surface world. His first breath was underground air. His first visual memories would be salt walls and LED lights. He was the first of what Dutch started calling the cave generation. I need you to hear this next part, because this is where everything changed. Subscribe and stay with me through what happened in month 8. The philosophical divide emerged slowly, then suddenly. It started with Kevin Foster, who'd turned 18 underground. He'd spent 6 months studying the mine's structure, learning from Dutch, understanding the systems that kept us alive. "We're safer here than we ever were topside," he said during a community meeting in month 8. "Down here, we control everything: temperature, security, resources. Why would we ever want to leave?" "Because this isn't how humans are supposed to live," Jerry shot back. "We're not meant to exist 800 feet underground in permanent darkness." "Says who?" "Humans adapt. We've adapted. The kids have adapted better than anyone." It wasn't an academic argument. Kevin represented a growing faction, mostly younger adults and all the children, who saw the mine as home rather than refuge. They'd stopped thinking about the surface as a place to return to. They'd started thinking about it as a threat to avoid. The older generation, Jerry, Dutch, Michael, myself, we remembered the world before. We knew what we'd lost. The younger generation, especially those like Kevin who'd been on the edge of adulthood when the collapse happened, had less invested in the old world and more in the survival we'd built. "We should seal the entrance," Kevin proposed, during month 9. "Permanently. Stop wasting resources on topside reconnaissance. Accept that this is our home now." "That's giving up," Jerry said. "That's adapting," Kevin countered. "There's a difference between giving up and accepting reality. The surface is gone. Those things aren't going to suddenly disappear. We have the chance to build something sustainable here, something safe, but only if we commit to it completely." The vote split almost perfectly along age lines. Everyone under 25 voted to seal the entrance. Everyone over 40 voted to keep it open. The people in between were split, uncertain which vision of the future made more sense. I broke the tie again, voting to keep the entrance open, but the margin was narrower this time, and I saw the resentment in Kevin's face, in the faces of the younger faction. They thought we were being sentimental, clinging to a dead world instead of embracing the new one we'd created. "You're condemning us to live in the past," Kevin said after the vote. "We could build something amazing here, but you won't let us." "We're keeping options open," I replied. "The moment we seal ourselves in is the moment we stop being human." "No," Kevin said quietly. "The moment we sealed ourselves in was the day we descended. Everything since then has been pretending otherwise. The ideological split became physical separation. Kevin and his faction, we started calling them the Sustainers, moved to the lower catacombs. They established their own living quarters, their own meeting areas, their own social structure. They still participated in shared labor and resource management. but they created a distinct community within our community. The older generation, the hopefuls, the sustainers called us with barely concealed mockery, remained in the upper chambers. We continued topside reconnaissance. We maintained the entrance. We taught the children about the surface world, even though half the kids now spent most of their time with the sustainers learning a curriculum focused on underground sustainability. Dutch watched the division with sadness. We survived the apocalypse only to fracture over philosophy, he said. Humans can't help themselves. Month 10 brought another crisis that temporarily unified us. The generator in Chamber 10 started failing. Tom had maintained it meticulously, but Tom was dead, and none of us had his technical expertise. The generator provided all our electrical power, lights, ventilation fans, water pumps, everything that made underground existence possible. Kevin emerged from the catacombs with a solution. He'd been studying the mine's infrastructure and believed we could tap into geothermal energy. The deeper chambers had higher temperatures due to proximity to the Earth's mantle. With the right equipment, we could theoretically generate electricity from that heat differential. It would take months to build, Kevin explained, showing designs he'd created. We'd need to excavate deeper, install heat exchangers, construct a working system from mine equipment. But once operational, it would provide unlimited power without fuel dependency. That's assuming it works, Jerry said. Assuming we don't kill ourselves excavating that deep. Assuming the mathematics are sound. The mathematics are sound, Kevin said flatly. And the alternative is living in darkness when the diesel finally runs out. We voted to attempt the geothermal project. Kevin led the construction, working with a team that included both sustainers and hopefuls. The ideological divide took a back seat to practical necessity. The excavation took 3 months of brutal labor. We dug deeper than the mine had ever extended, carving through salt and limestone, installing support structures, praying the chambers above wouldn't collapse from the disruption. Kevin worked 18-hour days, driving himself and his team with single-minded determination to prove the underground could provide everything we needed. During month 11, we lost someone else, not to infection or accident, but to something worse, despair. Marcus Delmont, 47, one of the surface equipment operators, walked into the deepest tunnel one night and didn't come back. We found him 3 days later, sitting against a salt wall in absolute darkness, dead from dehydration. He'd left no note, no explanation. But we all understood. The psychological weight of underground existence, the absence of sunlight and open air, the knowledge that we'd likely die in these chambers. Some people couldn't carry that weight indefinitely. Patricia started monitoring everyone for signs of depression, but she lacked the medications or therapeutic training to actually treat it. The best she could offer was awareness and conversation. "We're going to lose more people this way," she told me privately. "The physical survival is hard, but the psychological survival might be impossible for some. Humans weren't designed for permanent isolation and darkness. Can we do anything? Create meaning. Give people purpose beyond just surviving. Otherwise, we're just extending the process of dying." The geothermal system came online during month 13. When Kevin threw the switch and the generators hummed to life, powered by heat from the Earth itself, rather than depleting diesel reserves, something fundamental shifted. The sustainers had proven their vision. We could thrive underground, independent from surface resources. The celebration lasted 2 days. We had unlimited power now. We could expand lighting, improve heating, support more people if necessary. The mine had transformed from temporary shelter to permanent habitat. But the celebration was bittersweet for those of us who remembered what we'd lost. Every improvement, every successful adaptation, every piece of evidence that we could survive indefinitely underground felt like accepting that the surface world was truly gone. Comment your thoughts on what survival really means, because we were learning it meant different things to different people. Month 14, Jerry organized an expedition. Not a supply run or reconnaissance, but something different. He wanted to go back to town to see what remained of the places we'd lived. "I need to know," he said when I asked why. "I need to see it with my own eyes instead of imagining it." I went with him. So did Michael and Dutch, 4 men in their 40s and above, making a pilgrimage to the world we'd lost. The town looked almost peaceful under winter snow. The things had either moved on or frozen, we couldn't tell which. We walked through streets we'd known, past houses where we'd lived, through the remnants of normal life. Jerry stopped outside his old house. The door hung open. Windows were broken. We didn't go inside. Some endings don't need closer examination. We found the school where Sarah had taught. Desks were still arranged in rows, children's artwork still pinned to bulletin boards. A calendar on the wall frozen at October, the month the world ended. The grocery store had been thoroughly ransacked. The library had somehow remained intact, books sitting on shelves like they were waiting for patrons who would never come. The hardware store had collapsed entirely, probably during a struggle we'd never know the details of. We documented nothing. We took no photographs. Those would only lock the grief in place. We just walked and looked and remembered. On the drive back, Dutch spoke first. "Kevin's right, you know. That world is gone. What we saw today isn't our home anymore. It's a graveyard." "Then what are we?" Jerry asked. "Survivors." I said, "But of what? And for what?" The first anniversary of our descent arrived during month 12. We'd lost track slightly, but Dutch's meticulous calendar placed it at exactly 1 year since we'd fled underground. The community gathered in Chamber 7 for a commemoration that nobody wanted, but everyone needed. We read the names of those we'd lost. Tom Chen, Marcus Delmont. 8 others had died during the year. 2 from illness, 1 from an accident during excavation, 5 from the same quiet despair that took Marcus. 36 people remained from the original 45, but Emma's Thomas represented new life. And Emma was pregnant again, along with 2 other women. Death and birth balancing the mathematics. Kevin stood during the commemoration and spoke for the sustainers. 1 year ago, we fled here thinking this was temporary. We were wrong. This isn't temporary. It's permanent. This is our home now. Not a shelter, not a refuge, but home. The sooner we accept that, the sooner we can build something worth living for, instead of just surviving. Jerry stood and spoke for the hopefuls. 1 year ago, we fled here to preserve our lives and our humanity. We've preserved our lives, but our humanity requires remembering what we lost, honoring where we came from, maintaining the possibility, however remote, that someday our descendants might return to the surface. We can't let 1 year underground erase 10,000 years of human history living in sunlight. The philosophical divide was complete. 2 visions of humanity's future, both legitimate, both incompatible. I stood last, not representing either faction but trying to bridge them. We're 36 people in a salt mine, trying to figure out how to remain human after the world ended. Some of us think that means preserving the past. Some think it means building a new future. Maybe it means both. Maybe survival requires holding contradictions, honoring what was while adapting to what is. The speech satisfied nobody, which probably meant it was honest. That night, lying in my quarters carved from solid salt, I thought about the question we were all avoiding. Not whether we could survive underground indefinitely. Kevin had proven we could. The real question was whether survival alone constituted a life worth living, or whether something essential about being human required connection to the surface world. The younger generation, especially Thomas and the children born or raised entirely underground, would never struggle with that question. For them, the mine was reality. The surface was mythology. They'd build their lives in these chambers without the weight of memory telling them they'd lost something. But for those of us who remembered, who'd felt sunlight and breathed unfiltered air, and walked under open sky, we were living in a tomb. A functional tomb. A safe tomb. A tomb nonetheless. Month 15 brought the final confrontation. Kevin proposed expanding the community, sending teams to nearby areas to look for other survivors and bring them underground. We have the capacity for 100 people, he argued. We should be building population, not isolating. Bringing strangers down here risks everything we've built, Jerry countered. We have functioning systems, social cohesion, sustainability. More people means more variables, more conflicts, more risk, more chance at long-term survival. Kevin shot back. 36 people isn't a viable population long-term. We'll have serious genetic problems within 3 generations if we don't expand. He was right about the genetics. We'd need new bloodlines eventually, or face the consequences of inbreeding. But Jerry was right about the risks. We'd achieved precarious stability. Disrupting it could collapse everything. The vote was closer than any previous decision. 18 for expansion, 17 against. 1 abstention. Lucas now counted as an adult at 9 years old, who still hadn't fully rejoined the community after his trauma. I had to break the tie again. I thought about Thomas, 8 months old, and the children being born. I thought about the genetic bottleneck Kevin described. I thought about whether 36 people could truly constitute a viable future, or whether we were just delaying inevitable collapse. We expand, I decided, but carefully. Limited recruitment, strict vetting. We can't save everyone, but we can try to save enough. Jerry's faction saw it as betrayal. The next morning, Jerry asked to speak with me privately. I'm taking a group topside, he said. Not to recruit, to stay. We're done with the mine. You'll die up there. Maybe. Or maybe we'll find a way to survive on the surface like humans are supposed to. But I can't stay down here anymore, Marcus. I can't watch my daughter grow up thinking this. He gestured at the salt walls. Is normal. I can't let her forget sunlight exists. How many are going with you? 12, all hopefuls. All people who remember the before and can't let it go. The exodus happened during month 16. Jerry, his daughter Melissa, Michael, Dutch, and 8 others packed supplies and ascended to the surface. We gave them vehicles, weapons, food, everything they needed. The farewell felt like a funeral. You're committing suicide, Kevin told Jerry during the goodbye. I'm choosing to live, Jerry replied. There's a difference. We never heard from them again. Whether they survived on the surface or died attempting, I'll never know. But their choice freed something in the rest of us, the need to choose definitively what we believed survival meant. 24 people remained in the mine, All of us committed, for better or worse, to the underground existence. Kevin's vision had won by default. We were cave dwellers now, not refugees waiting to return home. The expansion teams began operations during month 17, small groups making careful expeditions looking for isolated survivors who might join us. They found 3 in the first month. A man named Gregory hiding in a farmhouse basement. 2 teenagers who'd survived in a fortified gas station. The integration process revealed how much we'd changed. The new arrivals struggled with the darkness, the constant temperature, the absolute isolation from the surface. Things we'd adapted to felt alien and horrifying to them. It took weeks of adjustment before they stopped asking when we'd be leaving, when we'd return topside, when rescue would come. "This is it," Kevin told them bluntly. "This is survival. You adapt or you don't. But we're not pretending there's another option." Gradually, they adapted. Humans are remarkably flexible when the alternative is death. I'm telling you this story now, month 24, 2 years after the descent, because we've reached an inflection point. The community has stabilized at 41 people, 24 original residents, 17 recruited from the surface. Thomas is walking now, talking. A healthy child who's never seen sunlight and doesn't know he's missing anything. 3 more children have been born underground. Emma's second son, Davis. A daughter born to Sarah, who found partnership with one of the recruited survivors. Another boy whose parents are both sustainers, both convinced that the underground represents humanity's future rather than its retreat. The children are healthy, the systems are functioning. The geothermal generators provide unlimited power. Kevin has proposed excavating agricultural chambers where we could grow food using artificial lights and hydroponic systems. We're moving from survival to civilization, a new kind of civilization, but civilization nonetheless. And I can't shake the feeling that we've become something other than human. We've preserved our lives and our intelligence and our social structures, but we've lost something essential: connection to the planet's surface, to the cycles of day and night, to the ecosystem we evolved within. Kevin says I'm being sentimental. He says humans are defined by adaptability, not by specific environments. He says we're proving that humanity can survive anywhere, that we're not confined to surface existence. Maybe he's right. Maybe the next generation will build something remarkable in these salt chambers. Maybe 1,000 years from now, historians, if anyone's left to write history, will mark this as the moment humans transitioned from surface dwellers to something more flexible. Or maybe we've just chosen a slower form of extinction, preserving our lives while abandoning the things that make those lives meaningful. I don't know the answer. I just know I'm supervising a salt mine that's become a city, leading a community that's become a civilization, trying to remain human in an environment humans weren't designed for. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever wondered what survival really costs and whether it's worth the price, share it. Someone needs to hear that we existed, that we tried, that we chose to continue, even when continuing meant transforming into something unrecognizable. The mine extends 800 feet below the surface. 3 million tons of salt surround us. Chambers large enough to hold cathedrals. Darkness that's absolute without our artificial lights. And in this crystalline underworld, 41 people are building something that might be humanity's future, or might be its tomb. I don't know which, but I know we're still here, still breathing, still surviving. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe Kevin was right months ago, and the moment we sealed ourselves in was the day we descended. Everything since then has been pretending otherwise. I'll let you decide.